All righty, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Community Arts Education Leadership Institute webinar applicant orientation. My name is Quanice Floyd, and I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership Development here at the National Guild for Community Arts Education. Joining me today, I have the fabulous John McCann, who's designer and facilitator for the Community Arts Education Leadership Institute. As well as 3 alumni of the program. So with us, these alumni are Cherie Hill, who's currently the Director of Community and Culture at the Luna Dance Institute of California, Thomas Skirtle Davis, who's the Executive Director of the Mainline Arts Center in Haverford, Pennsylvania, and Aurora Tashiko King, who's the Director of Programs at the Destiny Arts Center in Oakland, California. So before we begin, I just kind of wanted to go over some general housekeeping rules. We will be recording this webinar to send out later. So if you have any questions or you want to refer back to it, you will have access to that. And also because we are recording, we have muted your microphones, so there are no distractions in the background of the recording. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please submit them through the chat box. You should be able to find the chat box, I believe, in the top right corner. And those chat box questions that you have will come straight to myself and the other hosts as a part of this. Another background check is that the CAELI program, we will be talking about like the overall logistics of the CAELI program, who usually is accepted into the program, the logistics behind the program, why the program is important to the field, and how to apply, and what we're looking for in applications. You'll also hear from our 3 alumni who will be talking about their experiences and how the Community Arts Education Leadership Institute has impacted their program. So for me, I am also a CAELI alum, so sometimes I go back and forth between using Community Arts Education Leadership Institute and CAELI. So if you get confused, they're the same thing. Today's overall orientation should take about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Again, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit it in the chat box, which you can find on the right-hand side. And prior to us beginning the full conversation, I just want to know a little bit more about you all. So I'm going to send you a poll, and the poll has 2 questions. The first question is going to tell us about who you are and where you are at your current organization, and if you have currently connected with any of our CAELI alumni. So I'm going to send this poll out to you, and I'll give it about a minute for you all to respond. Oh, this is so cool. I like this. About 10 more seconds. Perfect. So just to give a background on who's on the call, we have about 13% of the people on the call who are in a CEO or executive director position. We have 48% who are program managers or program directors. 16% of people on the call are directors of education. 4% of people on the call work in marketing and communications, or they may be a marketing or communications manager or director. And 23% is self-identified as other. For question number 2, we have about 52% who's spoken to CAELI alumni and 48% who has not. So thank you all so much for participating. We're going to end the poll. Perfect. So as we move forward, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information, and then I'm going to let John McCann take over. So several years ago, the National Guild conducted a needs assessment, and we learned that fewer than 11% of executives at our member institution have received any sort of leadership training. So we developed the CAELI in partnership with John McCann and Partners in Performance. We developed the CAELI program as a way to create pathways for those who are currently in the arts education ecosystem, and to provide that leadership development so that they can reach the future dreams. So everybody's dream isn't necessarily to be an executive director or to be a CEO of an organization, but learning those leadership skills along the way can help in any facet of your life as a part of this ecosystem. So I'm going to turn it over to John, who could talk a little bit more about the overall CAELI program. And from here, I'm going to spotlight it so you all can see his amazing face.
My goodness. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you already. Yeah, thank you very much. I want to say hi to everybody. I'm not getting to see everybody's face, but I know there's a real range of folks on the call today, and it's really terrific to have so many of you join us. And I want to first just speak personally. This program, which we launched sort of with this gathering of people who might be interested in the program, this program sort of launches as of today. There'll be a lot of design work and materials development and all the things that will happen over the course of the program. But it really starts sort of March and April. We get ready for the meat of the program, which happens sort of April, May, June, July, up through the fall. But this is the most rewarding part of my professional experience every year. And I was thinking about why that is, and just thinking about today's call over the last 4 or 5 days. And there is something about the generous spirit which so rapidly develops amongst the 25 people who come into this program every year. It is absolutely astounding, it is consistent, and it's really fascinating. So as you're thinking today and engaging with the alumni and with Quanice and myself and others, we're hoping that you'll leave the conversation today being able to make a wise choice as to whether or not this program is a good fit for you. And if it's a good fit for you now, it might be a good fit at another time. But I do want to just say that consistently for the last decade, that generous spirit which evolves amongst the participants is really astounding, consistent, and just exciting to be a part of every year for me personally. In thinking about CAELI, sort of what feels like a long time ago now, but back during its genesis, there was one tenet that was very instructive in thinking about the design. And that was that leadership is not so much about a position. Leadership is not about being the chief executive or the executive director. But leadership, moreover, is a set of behaviors, a way of being with other people, a way of actually engaging across your organization and across your community. And therefore, when we look at the composition on the group today, with maybe 12 or 15% being executive directors, more than 50% being directing of programs within the organization, and then a number of people who serve other roles. This program is as valuable and has proven so over the last decades to any of you in any of those positions. It is not about creating executive directors, and it is not about serving executive directors, because the degree of complexity everybody has to deal with these days to lead in a way that's really purposeful is demanding of really effective leadership practice. And we hope that every year we get a more and more diverse group of people who represent different aspects of the organization. In addition to believing that leadership is not about a position, it is about a set of practices, the other belief we've had is really imbued in a definition that we've been working with and refining over the past decade. And it has 3 pretty simple phrases, but they're our working definition of leadership. And while if you go to your search engine, you can probably find 8 to 10 million different definitions, this is the one we've been working with and has really anchored a lot of our work and our design thinking on this. The 3 simple phrases in our definition: behaving in ways that bring people together to move things forward. Now, that definition begs as many questions as it answers. What behaviors? Bringing which people together and moving which people forward? Those are all vital and critical, and I think become systemic to our CAELI conversation over the next several months. But in this definition, we do believe that leadership is fundamentally about behavior. And effective leadership behavior is a mobilizing effort, bringing people closer and closer together. And due to that mobilized state that people are in, more good things get moved forward. So that's sort of the basis that we work on. I'm going to mention 5 learning outcomes that we have for the program. And again, these have been refined over the years. At bottom, I think they remain somewhat the same, but I think the refinement's been very critical as the program begins to respond to a world which is changing very, very rapidly. One of those is really to increase everybody's awareness about effective leadership characteristics. In this world that we're in now, I think it's true in the arts. It's especially true in community arts. Diversifying who is in the room, diversifying who is at the table, which voices are included when the choices are made in organizations. That's a huge commitment that many organizations are making. And it demands new characteristics within leadership. For example, to be really good at that and to do it with integrity, a person has to have deep curiosity. So developing deep curiosity, a person has to be able to express true empathy, to really understand and express the capacity for understanding how it is to be around that particular table. So leadership characteristics like curiosity and empathy become very important to doing the work of 21st century organizations, particularly as time continues to change and we begin to involve our institutions in legitimate ways. So increasing those awareness of the characteristics of good leadership, whether it be about curiosity, empathy, or otherwise. The second, being able to identify for each of us, and they would be different for each of us, what our core values are. What is it that we value? The more we know that, the more authentically we can show up and we can work with other people. So an important part of this program from the beginning is a facilitated process through which each of you would decide, this is really valuable to me. These 5 things matter most in my life. And with that deep understanding and with those choices made, being able to then work in a more authentic way with colleagues across the organization and across the community. The third learning outcome, to deepen each of our understandings about equity and how our personal biases really influence our leadership practice. And I think one would argue our practice in our families, in our communities, and beyond the boundary of the organization. So we work, and this comes right from the work that Ama Kojo, one of our facilitators and faculty members, reminds me of quite often, that first it starts with one of 3 I's, the individual, and knowing where I am as an individual when I show up with other people, around how I'm viewing the other people that I'm working with. And with a deep understanding of that individually, and knowing what tendencies I have that either get in the way of that or advance my capacity to work across the organization. So that first I, understanding myself as an individual. The second of those I's, the interpersonal, the being able to work with another individual in order to move things forward, particularly as we reach beyond to create broader service footprints and we also diversify our organizations internally. And the third I, the institutional or the organization, is only served well once we have started with the first of those, me as an individual and us as individuals working together in the interpersonal space that we inhabit. The fourth of the learning outcomes is really to make sure that we deepen our understanding of what strengths we are blessed with and carry with us every day, and what areas of our practice we would want to improve. So, for example, someone can be really, really good at being able to express and put out new ideas. And that can be a real blessing that they bring to an organization, and it's vitally important. Depending, though, how they act on that generating of those ideas and populating the organization with the ideas can really serve to suppress the ideas that other people may have. So an area where a person may want to build their strength and build their capacity is in the helping of other people in generating those ideas, and be able to listen intentionally and listen appreciatively to what ideas other people are putting forward. So to build on our strengths and understand what other parts of our practice we want to develop in order to be that fulsome leader in the organization. And finally, to really commit to your own development plan, so that as you're working, you can be very discerning and say, of all the things that I could work on, these are the 3 areas that I want my focus to be on, at least in the next steps in my journey. These are the next steps. So those are the 5 learning outcomes that we try to focus on. Again, understanding the characteristics of effective leadership, identifying what's important to us and how that relates to how authentically we can show up in the workplace each day, working with our community, with our artists, deepening our understanding of equity and our own biases as it goes to creating an equitable space for good work to get done, to make sure I'm having a deeper understanding built of my strengths, and I'm keenly aware of those areas I want to focus on, develop, and then commit to a plan in order to do that. So those are the 5 outcomes that we hope for the arc of the program. Finally, I'll just speak about the 5 elements that make up the program, and these are pretty much sequenced sort of on a timeline, but they don't fall necessarily, we finish one and then we start the other, but I'll do them in that sequence. The program starts with everyone doing a 360-degree feedback process. This is a process, so if you might imagine a circle, and wherever you're working, you may work in any given time of the day or week or month with teaching artists. You may work with community volunteers. You may work with the executive director. You may work with peers who are running other departments. If you're the director of education, you may work with the director of marketing or the director of fundraising. So you work with people in a circle. So we urge you to invite somewhere between 10 and 15 of those folks to actually think about their experience of working with you and to identify for you areas around which further development may serve you and serve you quite well in your organization. And then you receive that feedback anonymously from these 10 or 15 folks as we come together at Bryn Mawr in July. So the second component of the program is the 5 full days that you have with 25 colleagues and our wonderful group of facilitators and coaches. And that week is designed in ways in which you are able to participate and explore the world of leadership through a broad range of activities and experiences. And I want to pause for a minute to reinforce that. There are moments to where you'll be sitting and someone may be telling you something, but most of the work is activities that you will do amongst yourself and the rest of the group, and experiences you'll have together to really embed your own thinking into your own practice and provoke your own thinking in ways, hopefully, that are useful as you begin to leave Bryn Mawr and work on the 4th of the program elements, which is developing your personalized learning plan. And this personalized learning plan, which you would develop over those 5 days, considering maybe some of the information within your 360, considering the engagement with the colleagues and facilitators. And now you're going to move from that work to working individually with a coach and working with either Craig Coble or Mary Parrish over the next several months. And imagine the coaching as a series of conversations which you design and direct, where you're working with a coach. And the emphasis of that work is to support whatever changes in your own leadership practice that you're beginning to investigate, you're beginning to rehearse around, you're beginning to practice to improve your own leadership effectiveness. So that 4th area of the program, of the elements of the program, is the individual coaching. And again, that part of the program is designed to support you in any endeavor that you're looking at in where you're looking to improve and likely alter your own leadership practice, your own leadership behavior. And the 5th element, and I believe, I've been a convert in this area. The 5th area, I think, and the most important one, are the peer groups which evolve out of the 25 people. These peer groups, I'm believing, are more important because they can be lifelong relationships which you develop. These can be around a particular affinity which you have with other folks, Could be a group of 5 of the youngest leaders this summer who really get together and decide you want to continue the conversations which you begin at Bryn Mawr, and you have a peer group in which to do that. It could be around a particular challenge which the field faces or your organizations face. There could be a like-minded approach that several of you have to particular challenges within the field. I know I've gotten to work this past year in Cleveland with a group of 7 or 8 people, all from different years of the CAELI program, but come together to unify their efforts to mutually support one another around some of the challenges which community arts are wrestling with in and around Cleveland and Cuyahoga County and northern Ohio, for that matter. So the peer groups are that 5th element of the program, which really has such lasting value and is proving to be a way for people to remain very connected, but not just connected so people remain connected, to remain connected so people continue to take value from the mutual influence which people can begin to bear, the mutual support which people can bring. And you really have a group of thought partners for a lifetime that can emerge out of the program. So with that, I've just shared, I think, just a little bit about the 5 learning outcomes of the program and the 5 elements that make up the program. And with that, Quanice, I think I would turn back to you and just ask if there are other aspects of the program which we need to build into this. And once we have some of that from you, we'll turn to our 3 guests for the day, our alumni, and hear from Cherie and from Aurora and from Thomas.
Awesome, great, thank you. So what I would like to add on top of what everything is John said is this is for anyone and everyone who is just looking to seek to grow as a leader. It is quite often that people often become intimidated by work. This is not that place for you to be intimidated. This is a place for you to get to learn who you are better, for you to better understand the things that are going on around you, how to communicate with others around you, and how to collectively mobilize everyone so that we can all meet a greater goal. And so, yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over because now we have 3 people who are experts in CAELI here, and who are going to share their journeys. And I'll start off with Cherie Hill. I will spotlight you, Cherie.
You.
And can you just tell us, about your experience with CAELI?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I completed CAELI. I'm part of the class of 2017. And currently I am the Director of Community and Culture at Luna Dance Institute in Berkeley, California, as well as a dance teaching artist. And when I actually started CAELI, I was the communications manager at this organization and the chief of staff. And CAELI was recommended to me by our director of community engagement at that time. So some background on our organization is we're 27 years old this Friday, and our 2 executive directors are the original founder, and our other executive director has been here almost the whole time since Luna was founded. And at the time I started CAELI, it was the founder and other co-director, and then we had a tier of managers, which I was one of them, 3 managers, and then faculty and teaching artists. And as the organization is getting older and our founder is heading towards retirement and succession, we really had to start thinking about cultivating more leadership and new leadership and next generation leadership within the organization. So it was recommended that I take on CAELI and start to develop myself as a leader. And I really didn't know what to expect going into CAELI. I mean, I did the webinar, I applied, I had heard great things about CAELI, but I had never done an intensive leadership training. And I had never really thought of myself as the title of a leader. I knew there were things I was leading and things I was managing, but to be a leader wasn't something that I really had thought about. And I also realized, especially through my journey with CAELI, is that I haven't had the greatest role model leaders in my life as an example. I kind of viewed leadership as this very task overbearing thing you had to do. Like you have to do things like handle a bunch of budgets and tell people what to do and run around with your head like a chicken, you know, like with a chicken with its head cut off, like be very stressed. And I actually wasn't interested in, you know, being those things. And so it was really refreshing when I got to CAELI. And as John was saying, we were focusing on qualities of leadership, focusing on how you can be the best leader that you should be, focusing on things like core values and collaboration, making meaning out of your job and your role. And that was really the kind of leader I wish to be, and really excited me to be around 25 other leaders in arts education who were very diverse. You know, everyone, there's leaders of different ages, of different races, different genders. And that was just really inspirational because, again, I felt like my view of leadership was pretty narrow. And a lot of times when I was joining different committees in my community, I was often the youngest one, or the only person of color, or the only Black woman. So to be with other people who were developing leadership that were very diverse was really amazing and eye-opening for me of what leadership could entail, along with the intensive work we were doing over those 5 days to really dig deep into the qualities of leadership. A lot of things from CAELI really stick out to me, and I feel like influence my work now. But one thing that I really hold on to and continues to come up for me is this idea of self-renewal that was introduced to me while I was at CAELI. And I remember Ronnie Brooks talking about self-renewal, and she also just made this visual that I have such fond memories of, where she had all of our roles we play in life in the center, all these different, we might compartmentalize these different things we have to do. Like for myself, I feel like I play a lot of roles. I'm a teaching artist, I'm now a director, I'm also a choreographer, an artistic director of my own dance company. I'm also a mother of 2 children. I'm also a partner of 21 years. You know, I'm a daughter, I'm a community activist. There's like so many things. And she put all those roles in the middle, and on the outside was ourself. And it was just this beautiful illustration of body, mind, and spirit, and how important it is to realize that we might be playing different roles or have different titles, but it's always us. It's always us coming to the table. It's always our whole self wherever we are. And so I've just really taken that to heart, and have been focusing on integration of myself and integration of my roles, which was something I really struggled with, I feel like, before CAELI. And it's been amazing. I was invited to be a plenary speaker at a conference this past weekend, the Montalvo Artists in Your Classroom conference. And they wanted an artist who was also an educator to talk about their art. And it took me a while, but I found a way to really talk about not only my art, but also my teaching, human development, my role as a community activist, and how that all influences my art and what I do in life. So I feel like that self-renewal piece is continuing to really expand for myself, and really owe that to CAELI and what I learned. Another thing that really sticks out that I just feel like was so invaluable was the coaching. I had a wonderful coach, Craig Coble, who will be continuing to coach this year. And it's just so amazing to have someone you can talk to that's outside of your organization, that's just an expert and has coached so many people, and that really listens to what you're saying. And I feel like we just developed this really, really magical relationship. And it wasn't even like when I'd be talking to him and I'd be complaining, like he would just always side with me or make things easy. You know, he really would challenge me at times, and he'd be able to bring other perspectives that I just wasn't thinking of, to open myself up to other ways of handling issues and other ways of interacting with my colleagues. And it was just so invaluable. And I also, in my CAELI year, I was going through this transition of, okay, am I going to move into a new role of leadership that has more responsibility? And he really helped coach me through that. And with him and the two directors, I was able to form the position that I'm now trying out, which is the Director of Community and Culture, which is a position Luna has never had before. And that was really formed through help with my coach. So I wish I still had a coach, you know, it's so great. But, and we keep in touch now and then. So yeah, this experience, I feel like if you're on the fence or you're not sure, you know, you want to develop in leadership, but maybe you've had some bad examples and you're just not sure if it's right for you, I would say just go for it. Like, it's gonna be beneficial no matter what, and it's definitely worth it. And it's a very unique program that I'm really, really happy that I joined and was accepted into. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. Also, as a reminder for folks who are currently on the line and joining us, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit it in the Zoom chat group box. Up next, I'm going to invite Aurora King, Director of Programs at Destiny Arts Center, to talk about her journey as well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Aurora King, and I currently work at Destiny Arts Center in Oakland, California as the Director of Programs. This is actually my last week at Destiny. I'll be transitioning to a new role in Chicago as the Director of Education at Marlin. So big changes underfoot, and there's actually a lot of kind of pathways that were opened up as a result of the work that and the people that I was able to meet at CAELI. So I did the 2015 class. My story was basically I had just landed at Destiny Arts Center after being abroad for about 2.5 years with my family, relocating back to the Bay Area after being away and having a child. I kind of found myself in my, what I would have considered in that moment to be my dream job. It was with an organization that I really respected and felt just a deep kind of reverence for. It was also a really challenging time because I was just coming out of, you know, figuring out who I was as a new parent and being humbled as I navigated, you know, language barriers and just all kinds of things, and then finding myself back in Oakland. So it was really great to be able to have this opportunity to really to take a break for a minute and just be in a place where it wasn't all about, you know, what I needed to do next, or, you know, how I was going to move this thing, or how I was going to organize something, but really how taking care of myself. So I would say that the most powerful aspect of CAELI for me was actually the cohort. It was an incredible group of people that I got to meet and build with, and all in this space that was very nurturing and with good food and, you know, good conversation and all of that. And what I learned was that I wasn't alone in this work, that the power was really in the collective and how we can build together, be it within our organizations or within on a national level, how we can actually learn from each other and be inspired and be lit up by the work, by kind of finding our people who can support that. So that has been something that I have taken with me in my work at Destiny, and kind of informing my understanding of who I am as a leader, because I'm not by nature this person that's you know, wanting to be this kind of figurehead inspirational person. Like I want to build and learn with people, and I want to. My passion is really around how can we center the voices that aren't in the conversation that are actually the most deeply impacted by the work. And so that to me has been a process of learning and working that really started at CAELI, but also in other spaces in my work in Oakland. And so that to me is a really important piece, is the cohort. So another thing that's kind of cool about my trajectory is that because of the relationships that I formed at CAELI, I really believe that this is how I'm making it to Chicago. I have community there that directly comes out of friendships that I built with a friend there at CAELI, and then it then kind of opened up the whole world of like Chicago community arts, which I have been following for years, but never really had an intimate connection to, and was able to go there with my family and like experience the city, experience more inspiring people there, and kind of build in that way. And I know as someone who's very rooted in the Bay Area that I would not make this choice if I didn't have that community waiting for me, even though the job is so incredible. It would be too hard with my family. So I feel like there's just this network that has been built and is kind of exponentially just part of my life as a outcome of this. It's also a huge part of the way that I view myself as a leader, is like, how can I be an inquiry? How can I build networks to support thought partnership for people within that I'm supporting? Like not necessarily thought partnership within the organization, that for sure, but also like outside of the organization. Like I think that it's really important that in this work we don't get too isolated, and that we know where to turn and how to be inspired in this work for ourselves, because sometimes it's just grinding and you don't have that. It's really hard. So that's a huge part of the work that I've been focused on, is really how do you build alliances with others? How do you figure out ways for people across your organization to have that experience? How do you center leadership that is marginalized, because there's so much leadership happening in every organization, but that's not necessarily the voices that are being heard. So I feel like a lot of that came out of kind of a synergy between the CAELI experience and then other experiences in my life that have built out from there. And yeah, and I think that that's probably the biggest take home for me, is really that cohort experience. And one of the interesting things that happened at CAELI when I was there was we began to have this really fruitful conversation around racial equity within the cohort. And so because it's this cohort of incredible people, we were able to find space outside of the formalized structures to actually continue those conversations, and then to bring it back to the Guild, and then the Guild responded to that. So it feels very, the whole process feels very kind of reciprocal and like a cycle of inquiry between the Guild and the folks that are putting together this leadership, and also the leaders that are there. So really demonstrating that sense of shared accountability and like building something together, which I really appreciated. And I feel like, having done it in 2015 and hearing about from John about like the vision, I can see how there's been a shift, and that's super exciting to me. And it just shows that they're modeling the same kind of leadership that we want to see, which is about centering the voices both in the room and outside of the room. So I really appreciate that. I think that's it.
Great, thank you so much. That was awesome. And last but not least, I'm gonna spotlight Thomas Skirtle Davis, who is the Executive Director of the Mainland Arts Center. Put you on spotlight, perfect.
Hi everyone. I actually think least after hearing all those voices. John really crystallizes what this program is about, and Aurora and Cherie really spoke to, I think, a lot of the heart of the program. And so I had prepared remarks, but I like to veer away from them. So I'm going to veer a little bit. When I first came to my organization in 2010, I was the director of finance and operations after having a pretty varied career. I didn't, unlike a lot of people who do the college track or don't do the college track, were forced to have careers or thought about careers. I didn't really think about my career. I did whatever showed up at the time, whatever turned up, I took it, and I learned from it. I was a baker. I ran my own painting company. I was an opera singer for 15 years. I was a voice teacher. I've done restaurant work. I worked as a temp for the Pew Charitable Trust, so I learned foundation work through a long period of temping for them. So I came in 2010, which is or 2011, which was my year. That was the second cohort of this program. I came with a lot of, for lack of a better word, I'll just say was experience. And that experience brought with it a lot of baggage. As an opera singer, you sort of learn to survive because there's not a lot of money in that gig unless you're, one of the top 10, and I was not one of the top 10. And so I improvised a lot, and I did a lot of things. And what improvisation and sort of learning to improvise my life did for me was it built a lot of, for lack of a better word, what I would call expertise in a lot of different areas. So I have a pretty broad base of knowledge. The problem with that is, for me, my personality type is that I then sort of transfer the word knowledge to the word expert. And you can sort of look like and I'm just so you know, you can't see me now, but I'm, 6'3", 6'2", 6'3"-ish, and, 200 and some odd pounds. So you take expertise and an operatic voice and having done a lot of different things, and it can sometimes come across as arrogance, right? So one of the most important things that happened to me in CAELI when I came was this 360 sort of review process where my peers and my mentors and people who worked for me gave just genuine, honest feedback, which I was not completely surprised by, but was taken aback by, right? And what I had to do was really hold up the mirror, which I think CAELI does very well, and confront some issues in my own leadership where my behavior, as John said, wasn't meeting up with my desired direction and the effect that I wanted to have on people. I have no desire to be arrogant. I have no desire to be unliked. I have no desire to be any of those things. But I wasn't actually paying attention to the effect of what my leadership style, and I was a sort of department leader, right, but not the executive director then. So the effect of that was sort of passing me by. But it was obvious from the 360 review process that it was squarely hitting everyone else between the eyes. And so I had to confront that. And it was a difficult, I'm not going to lie, it was a really difficult week for me. I'm a person who goes all in, sort of becomes loyal right away. I learn by talking, which is problematic for me as a leader. And it's something I needed to confront. And in a very loving and empathetic and gentle way, CAELI allowed me to do that in a safe space with a bunch of other folks who were working with their own challenges and came to the work open-hearted and genuinely wanting to improve themselves, and therefore, could cut you some slack. And I needed slack, and so I could use enough rope to hang myself with, right? So so that's the sort of where I came to, and we at the end of CAELI, when I was in CAELI, we went around the room, we did this exercise, what's the one word that describes how you're feeling right now? And I think what I said then was gratitude, but what I would say now is holistic. The amazing thing about the CAELI program is that it's not one aspect of leadership that you come away with. There might be an emphasis for you on one aspect or another, but it it serves the whole person. And my son goes to a school where they want to work on the whole child. And that's how I feel like I left CAELI going, oh, wow, there's a bigger universe for me to examine of my own, and examine the effect I'm having. And is that the desired effect that I'm looking for? And if not, where's the disconnect, right? And so I'll just say that sort of one of the exercises that, or one of the sessions in CAELI when I went through the program, and I think, John, that you still do this, was this ladder of inference. Because I have this broad knowledge in a bunch of different subjects. Oh, I was a database developer. Let me see, were there other things I did that impact my work today? So that was another one. Because I came with this broad sense of knowledge, often my first reaction was to speak and not listen. And John's shaking his head for those of you who can't see them because he remembers 11 years ago how much I talked. It's interesting that Kwani strategically chose to put me at the end of these three talks, because I think she must have been talking to James or someone who knew. But I wanted to get that out. I'm a very energetic, you know, my positive qualities are I'm very energetic, I'm very dynamic, I'm very committed to the work, and I wanted to share that. And I learned, like I said, I learned by talking. So, and then hearing people's reactions. And what I wasn't doing is hearing people's reactions, right? And so I was making a lot of inferences about what people thought or what people might say that I needed to check in on, and I needed to spend more time in inquiry. And CAELI gave me the tools to sort of do that, to say it's okay, you know, to just listen for a really long time. And John has this great phrase, and I don't know about Aurora and Cherie, but I will say I'm pretty sure they too have these little journals that were given at the beginning of the CAELI program, and they are filled with one-liners and unbelievable wisdoms, little nuggets of wisdom that the faculty share with you. Yeah, Cherie is holding hers up. If you can't see her, she's actually holding them up. And John said this thing, which I had never heard before, but I've heard many times since, this idea of listening other people into their own learning. And incredibly powerful one-liner, right? It took, you know, 1 second of 1 day of 7 days or 5 days or however many days you're there, but changed my outlook and my perception completely on the work I do. And John was talking about values, and I'll say I came in with really strong set of values for myself personally, and I left with most of those were the same values, but this idea of challenging myself to be a great listener, not a good listener, but a great listener, challenging myself to wait until 4 other people have spoken in a meeting with 6 people in it before I say something. Not because I don't think I know what the answer is, not because I lack confidence, but because in fact I have confidence and I have a sense of self. And always putting that out there doesn't leave space in the room for other people to share what they know, to become the leaders, to become experts. One of my colleagues is on this call because I had strongly suggested to her that she come to this program, as it was strongly suggested to me by a colleague who I really respected, which is how I got into the program in the first place. And my leadership style now is much more about facilitating rather than sort of dictating or directing. I don't do any directing at all, almost. I do have an ED card now, so I get to pull that out every once in a while. But I try not to use it, and I do a lot more listening, checking for understanding, ensuring that I'm actually hearing what I think I'm hearing, and trying to shut the voice in my head, that pre-filter, down. So that was probably the tool that came out of CAELI the most for me. The network is undeniable. You know, some of my best friends in the world are CAELI alum, and not even from my year, right? But CAELI alum, I didn't go through this program with. CAELI alum, I've been at the conference with, had conversations with. There's a bond and a connection that's, you know, it's indescribable and incredibly powerful. There are people there for you when you're done with this that you didn't even know were there for you until you need to call on them, and you call on them and they show up, which is pretty astounding considering we didn't even spend a week together in Bryn Mawr. Just 2 more things I'm going to say because I know my time is up and I tend to run long. One is I hope that when you guys come to Bryn Mawr, I'll meet you because we're just down the street. It would be great to see people and meet new folks. And the other is that not very often in your life do you have a sort of what you would call a transformative experience. And I think several of us already talked about that. And then what do you do with that transformative experience is the question that you have to ask yourself, right? And so I had this experience at CAELI, and I've always sort of given to charity and done some things, but I've never really stretched myself or pushed myself to do anything. And 2 years ago when I went to the conference, I had a long conversation with James Horton, who is the old Quinice, discussing, diversity and equity, inclusion and access, and the impact of the CAELI program on me. And through a couple of beers and a half-hour conversation, I decided that the alumni needed to support this program, that this program should be funded by those people whose lives have been significantly affected by it. And so James and I hatched this plan to create a CAELI Alumni Scholarship program. I told him I'd commit, $500 a year in perpetuity or until I'm broke or get fired. And we'd try to raise the rest of the money from the alumni. And last year, more than 25% of all of the alums at that point, so there were 201 at the beginning last year, raised enough money to send one person to CAELI, including travel stipend and everything else. That super hyper motivated me and made me really happy. And so I went out this year and was like, in addition to my $500, I'm going to ask people that I know who see my leadership style and value it, to give me money to help fund CAELI scholarships. And on my own, by simply asking, and I have privilege and I know some folks, so that admittedly, by simply asking two people, I have funded one of the scholarships this year, and I'm looking really forward to the alumni pulling together. And now with 227 of us, or 200 and whatever it is, 28 of us, everybody gives $10 or $15, or average $10 or $15, we funded another scholarship. And I think it doesn't say much about me, but it says a lot about the CAELI program, that this happened, that I was inspired to do this. It speaks really strongly to the effect of this, both on my career, that I'm lucky enough to be in a position now where I have $500 I can put towards something I really believe in, but also that I built a network of people who believe that what I learned at CAELI has impacted my organization and the networks I belong to in such a strong way that they're willing to put their money behind it. My goal is in 10 years, we'll fully fund the CAELI program from CAELI alum. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be calling on you. If you enter the program this year, next year, you can expect an email from me. And with that, I'm 3 minutes over. I apologize, but I will sort of end what I had to say.
Thank you so much. So I am going to share the screen again. And now it's time for question and answer. Again, a reminder for those who are joining us or who've joined a little bit late, that we will be looking at questions via the Zoom group chat box. So please be sure to submit them there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Quinice. One question, as these questions begin to tumble in, I wanted to just pose to each of you a pretty short one. They're different in each instance, but Thomas, you were talking about holding the mirror up and the 360 process, and I'm reminded that Craig Coble, who was referred to earlier, who is one of our wondrous coaches, Craig talks sometimes about leader development being about the individual being able to better align the intentions they have in the world with the impact they're having in the world. And that any program that can help align that is actually of service, as of value. But you spoke about the 360 process really being able to hold up for you, giving you the opportunity to hold up a mirror, yet you also said it was challenging for you. And I just wonder, in maybe 30 to 90 seconds, if you might just give us a little bit of the story behind the story in that, in what it's like to have 10 or 15 people say, hey, I know your intentions are noble. I know you want to do fabulous work in the world, and your intentions are never to be questioned, but here's some observations of the way that you're currently working. Just talk a little bit about that experience, because it seems to be in this program at the nub of the investment that people make, is this ability to work in the program to better align, again, the intentions I have for change in the world and the impact that I'm having in the end. And if those are out of whack, then I can, maybe I don't have near the impact over a lifetime or over in the profession that I'm working in. But could you just speak a bit about that?
Yeah, so first, I'll just say I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I would not be capable of doing the job that I'm doing now. I mean, performance-wise, if I hadn't been to CAELI and if I didn't learn a habit of holding up the mirror, right? So my colleagues know I use this phrase all the time now, with them and with myself. I'm constantly holding up the mirror because I don't want to slip back into this place where my intentions and my outcomes are not aligned. And so, you know, it's painful to hear the truth about yourself sometimes when you have your blinders on. And also, how much do I honor those folks who took the time to tell me that? And it was a consistent message, right? And they put themselves out there, even if it was anonymous. You can tell who writes these things mostly because you know people. And so I had to be willing to work with that. I had to be willing to be in that space of being sort of very upset with myself and disappointed in myself, which I hate being. And I just had to hold that and let what would develop out of that, and ask for the patience of my colleagues in the CAELI program and say, wow, I didn't know this was me, and you're probably seeing this. You know, I hate it when someone says, the first time I met you, I was so intimidated. It's the absolute worst thing I can hear because it's the exact opposite of my intention. So there's still work to do,
Great.
but
Great.
yeah.
No, very, very helpful. And just Aurora, the comment that you made right at the beginning of your sharing with us was the cohort itself, meaning the 25 people, was the most valuable aspect of the program. And I wonder, even if it's just naming off 5 ways in which that were proven to be true, but could you just put a bit of a finer point on that? Because it can sound a bit abstract. Oh, the cohort was really important to me. But just say a bit more about what made the cohort the most important aspect of the program for you, considering where you were then. And it seems after you finished the program, like you made reference to Chicago, you have relied upon the cohort or members of the cohort since. But could you give us just a minute or so on the real ways in which the cohort has proven valuable to you?
Sure. I would say that, so one thing was just to experience in the room how much our stories were similar. like people were sharing stories confidentially, and kind of grappling with a lot of the same dynamics within their organizations. And so that felt, it made me feel connected, and also like a sense of like shared experience that was being built over the week, which was really powerful. I would say that, you know, I have really dear friends that are both friends and also like amazing thought partners and colleagues that sit in different places across the country as a result of the cohort that was there. And then from that point, you know, they've introduced me to other people. So I feel like you kind of begin to have this network of people that you can look to and think with, and you know, just have friendships with that are kind of experiencing similar things as you are, and also maybe doing things differently that you can learn from, or just there to listen if things are hard or if things are really inspiring. I have from those relationships, you know, presented at the Guild Conference. I'm going to be participating as part of the National Work for Creative Youth Development in the field building, and there are folks that are from that have done CAELI and also that are part of that cohort that are also participating in that. So I'm always excited, especially as I'm making this huge move, to know that I have this anchor of people across the country in the Bay Area and in other parts that I can always turn to and build with. Kind of, it's like there's a sense of the ground beneath you that's different, and it kind of just expands the scope to a more of a national scope versus the finite nature of being within your organization. It's also beautiful, but just understanding also the power of that network, and also how do you create networks like that for yourself and also for others. I think is a big part of leadership, is like, how do we expand our network so that everyone can have that kind of thriving thought partnership in their day-to-day, and someone they can call on and talk to that maybe isn't right there with them in the work.
Great. Great, great. Thank you very much. And Cherie, I loved I didn't get it all down, but you gave this 3-part description of how you had assumed leaders were supposed to be. I only got a couple. I didn't get the third, but there are folks who handle a bunch of budgets and run around being very stressed. A classic way of, yes, thinking the leader carries the world on their shoulders and they remain stressed all the time and they run from one important meeting to another. But you talked about that in the context of role models. And I wonder, as you continue to do your work, and you talked about the very different dimensions of your work, from being a mom to being a life partner, to being a teaching artist, to being a director. So you name many different dimensions of that. So you've got a lot to draw on there. What do you see now as, what's a good model? I mean, what would you look to and say, if you were working with someone for a while and say, my goodness, that person, I think, really is working in the world as a good and effective leader? What might you see other than they run around stressed all the time? So what's your new indicators you'd work with?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a perfect leader out there. You know, we're all human and we have our strengths and our places of improvement. And I think we're all working, and a lot of us have good intentions. But what I've seen in my organization start to change is this process of collaboration and shared decision making. You know, it used to be a lot more top down. The directors or the manager director team would look at an issue, would talk about it, would solve an issue. And what we're doing now is we're really sharing some of the issues that come up with our whole staff, and are making space and opportunities for everyone to have an input and to share any concerns they have or ideas. And I feel like that, to me, has been so refreshing, because it kind of takes the burden off of you. You know, like I was saying, there's this thing of like, you have to make every decision and you're running around stressed and it's like the world's on your shoulders. But when you start to open up to your colleagues and faculty and allow them to be a part of the decision-making process and allow them to know what's happening and have less secrets, it just feels less burdensome. And I also have seen staff feel like they're valued more and that their opinions matter, which I believe is helping bring them closer to the organization.
Great, great, thank you. We'll get through a few of the questions which you all have posed. One question says, who is the ideal CAELI participant and who would benefit from the Institute the most? Again, I think just like Cherie said, there is no ideal leader. There is no perfect leader, probably not an ideal candidate. Just one response to this question, I think, would be about it being an ideal participant and who would benefit from the Institute. I think Cherie sort of led us there when she was talking about being willing to open up with your colleagues. I would say that is a really important threshold. So the capacity to be vulnerable, the capacity to open up, and the capacity to be as authentic as one can be with one-on-one discussions and group conversations within the cohort of CAELI. So I think that helps reflect who an ideal candidate would be. I think another is you're at a place to where you know you've got some really good thinking going on and you want that thinking to be challenged. And I say that earnestly. You've got really good thinking going on, whether it's about leadership, about organizational direction, about the way of the world, about what community arts education can do, and you really want your notions to be challenged. Then I think the program would be a really, really good fit, because it's that desire to be challenged, knowing that I'm building up my own frame of reference. And I know through the challenging of that, it'll even be a richer and more influential frame of reference. And I think the third thing about being an ideal candidate would be, I'm ready to really serve the work of my colleagues. And I think there's so much. Yes, there are those of us who work as facilitators across the week. There are those who work as coaches. But it is the conversation participant to participant, in groups of 2, in groups of 3, or in groups of 4, where it's evident that I'm in this conversation as a helper to my colleague. So I think those 3 things would really be something to think about. I'm ready to open up to colleagues. I've got some really good notions that are forming that I would like for people to challenge, and I want to be in service to my colleagues. So that would just be one response to, you know, who makes a good candidate for CAELI. Someone asked, I would like to grow in my ability to guide the group of teaching artists who work with my organization to build lasting relationships as artist educators with partners that we collaborate with. Could this program help me grow in that skill? I believe I'd like to turn that back to Cherie, Aurora, and Thomas, and I'll just read it again, and if any of you would leap in. But I think you could be testament to this in a much better way than I or Quinice might. So the question again is, I would like to grow in my ability to guide our group of teaching artists who work with my organization in building lasting relationship as artist educators with partners that we collaborate with. So thoughts from any of the 3 of you about the program and that particular desire that this individual has?
I can speak to that. This is Cherie. And one of the things that I think all of us have touched on is the idea of core values, which was introduced to me more deeply when I participated in CAELI, and was something that I brought back to my staff that first year I came back from the intensive. And what I realized is our staff works at our organization because they do abide by our mission and they do share our values, but it doesn't necessarily mean that our specific values are exactly the same as theirs. And so by leading my staff through a process of talking about values and their values, what they value in their teaching, what they value as far as building relationships and being part of the organization, and then discussing how that connects to our mission and to the values of the organization, and even talking about, can we expand what we see as our values as an organization, I found really helped staff connect in this meaningful and personal way to the work they were doing in the communities we're serving. And so it didn't seem just arbitrary of kind of like, yeah, this is our mission and we're going out and teaching, but really they could start to speak about, this is what I value and this is how it connects to my organization, and this is how I see it happening in the classes I'm teaching and the community we're serving. And that's been really beneficial for us.
Great, terrific, thank you. And we're going to turn it back to Quinice. There was one other question that folks asked about, has anyone had experience with both CAELI and an MPA program? I'm assuming here that that's like a master's in public administration. That is a question that a bunch of us could take offline and follow up to this call today. Many people have done, again, executive education programs at Stanford, at Harvard, at the same time they were doing the CAELI program. Jose Ochoa, for instance, in Chicago would be a really terrific informant. So whoever asked that program, if you'll make sure that we know who you are, we can follow up with you directly on that. And with that, Quinice, I'll turn it to you, and knowing that I've already stolen 4 minutes of your time, sorry.
No, it's fine. There was one question where someone asked about the difference between applying as an organization versus applying as an individual. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the National Guild. So we are a membership organization, and a lot of people who go through, well, the history of CAELI was that people were at one point executive directors in roles as a part of organizations. Now we've opened it up to anybody who is a stakeholder within community arts education. So there are some people who might be applying as a teaching artist or as a consultant, and they don't necessarily, they're necessarily not getting the backing from their organization. So it all depends on where you are within your organization. If you want your organization to be a part of that process, which more than likely they will be. If they will be paying for you, that's another question. But I could definitely, whoever asked that question, I'll definitely share my information with you so we can dig a little bit deeper as to what would work best for you.
Great,
Perfect. So now is the what everyone's been waiting for is how to create a compelling application. So this year, again, we've been mixing together individual and people who come from organizations, as well as our financial aid application. So it is one long application. We would have a panel of CAELI alumni who will be looking at these applications. And again, the maximum amount of people within a CAELI class would be 26. And so when we look at the applications, we're looking at things that demonstrate your leadership potential. For example, your experience with leadership, leadership qualities that you want to hone in on, your strengths, your weaknesses, how well you know yourself as a leader. We also look at the demonstrated commitment to a career in arts education. If, for example, someone who, like Aurora, was transitioning out of a role, if you happen to be having a transition in a role or out of a role, into a role or out of a role, how dedicated are you around that community arts education? How are you helping us and helping the field at large contribute to a more deeper understanding of arts education and the need for it in the future? And then also being active and engaged. So this CAELI Institute is very, very internal digging and deep diving within yourself. So the work that you get out of CAELI is the work that you put into CAELI and into yourself. And we need to see that coming across the application. And so in order to apply, the application is due April 5th. So we have a few weeks from now. And the application includes general information, whether or not you're applying as an organization or as an individual. I see other questions that's still asking about organization and individual, and I'll talk to you all offline. I'm going to share my contact information following this slide. And we asked for a 2-page statement or a 3-minute video. We know that some people are more expressive in video. Other people are more expressive writing. So it's your choice, but we need to have one or the other. We also asked questions of why is participating in CAELI important at this stage in your life? What are some instances where someone gave you feedback, some guidance? How did you work with others within that role? And what are your dreams and how will that impact the future of arts education? We also asked that you include your resume and a letter of recommendation. So a letter of recommendation is anybody that you work closely with. If you're applying as part of an organization, we ask that the letter of recommendation come from someone who is that you report to, or if you are an executive director, someone from the board. And then in the letter of recommendation, we would ask how the person knows you, in what capacity, how long, why they feel you would be a good candidate. And then for those that are applying as a part of an organization, they'll ask them a little bit more in-depth questions about like participating in the financial aid and supporting that person financially. And so I want to actually put an asterisk, because to me, this is one of the most important parts. The National Guild is one of our core values is equity. So we want to make sure that we are not perpetuating any barriers so that people cannot participate. We want to make sure that we are dismantling those barriers. So with that, we have opportunities for financial aid. And John spoke about this earlier about having travel stipend. Thomas Skirtle Davis talked about our CAELI Alumni Scholarship program. So we have plenty of ways for you all to participate if it's not financially, physically able for you to do so. And so more information about that can be found on our website and as well as on the application. And last but not least, so for more information about CAELI, please feel free to go to the National Guild website, nationalguild.org/CAELI, C-A-E-L-I. Again, my name is Quanice Floyd. I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership Development. I oversee the CAELI program along with John. My email address is up here at QuaniceFloyd@nationalguild.org. Or if you have any questions more so about the curriculum of the program, you can contact John, and his email address is located here as well. And then I just want to make sure that I screen this to say thank you to our fabulous alumni who participated on the call. You can also contact them if you want to know about their experiences in CAELI and how that's impacted their life in a more deeper conversation that's less than 10 minutes. Or more than 10 minutes, I should say. Yeah, so you can reach Thomas via this tskirtle-davis@mainlineart.org. Cherie Hill is chill@lunadanceinstitute.org. And Aurora King is at aurora@destinyarts.org. But again, Aurora is getting ready to transition into a new role. So I think she only has access to this email until April 1st. If you can't reach her, feel free to reach me anytime. So thank you all. I'll put this back up here in case anybody didn't get it the first time. And if that's it, I think that's it. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to send me an email, send John an email, send our alumni an email. And thank you so much for participating. And we look forward to seeing your application.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.